Topwater is one of my favorite ways to start out a summer morning. I'll throw a full-size frog into lily pads, thick matted vegetation, or grass beds that come up to the surface. And that frog that I'll start out with would be something like this. Now if that frog is getting blown up on, but the fish are missing, and they're just in a weird mood, I'll downsize to a smaller frog like this one. This is like the best small frog I've ever used. They just get bit over and over, and hookup ratio is excellent. And if I just want to chuck and wind the frog, this is like a weedless whopper plopper right here. This is the Teckle Sprinkler Frog. For walking baits on calm water, I'll start out with the Megabass Giant Dog X. If the water is choppy, and you have a little bit of wind, now I'll switch to the Evergreen Shower Blows. This thing is loud, makes a lot of commotion, and the fish can find it better when the water is choppy. And you might have noticed this only has 2 hooks. It comes with 3, but I took this middle one off because during the fish bites I noticed that it was kind of tearing into the fish more than anything. So I removed it, and I haven't had any issue with the hookup ratio whatsoever, so I just left it like that. And when the bite's just tough and not touching any of the top water that you're throwing, oop, that's upside down, I'll go to a popper. Even though this thing's not like a subtle popper, this is a pretty thick profile. But that thing also gets a ton of bites. You'll want to fish any of these lures near the edges of grass lines, laydowns, or points, anywhere a bass can just ambush from underneath. Now the next 2 I always group together because they work in the same exact conditions, whether it's overcast, rainy, or windy, but that's a good time to use a fast moving bait, and I'll always try a spinnerbait and a chatterbait. The more chop on the water, the more I lean toward the spinnerbait. As far as where I throw these 2 baits, it's always going to be around weed beds. You can go right between lily pads. They're both pretty weedless. You just have to be more careful around wood with the chatterbait. They always turn upside down and get stuck for me anyway. But while you're reeling those things in, don't just chuck and wind straight to the boat. You always want to impart some type of action, whether it's a rod twitch or reeling faster every other reel turn or so. Just burn it, pause it, and just do something to trigger the bite. And if you missed the previous video where I've been fishing a chatterbait that's cheaper than a jackhammer but producing just as well as one, I'll link that video at the end. Now if your pond allows it and has enough open water, never overlook a good crankbait. I'll use one that dives just deep enough to tick the top of the grass no matter what depth I'm fishing. And a lot of the times a crankbait serves both as a fish finder and a depth finder, and it's found to me a lot of the humps that are out in the open water because it just slams right into them, and then you know it's a high spot. One crankbait that I like to use is right here. This is the 13 Fishing Jabberjaw. And this is another great crankbait. This is the Strike King Hybrid Hunter. This is the junior model, and this comes through grass amazingly. Now let's talk about jigs. What I hear all the time about jig fishing is throw it out, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and then you just hop the bottom with it or drag the bottom with it, imitating a crawfish or something like that. And you need a hard, rocky bottom to be able to fish one efficiently. And I've heard so many times, if you have a soft, muddy bottom that's like mucked up with grass or whatever else that might be on the bottom of a pond, just leave your jig at home and don't even bother with one. And man, if you're doing that, that's a huge mistake. You're missing out on so many fish with a jig. I catch so many bass with that exact condition. The only thing is, I don't care about bottom fishing. Bassin ponds feed on bluegill, plain and simple. And this jig right here imitates just that. When you rig these jigs with a Strike King Rage Menace turned sideways, like this, I cast it near anything that I think holds a bass, like a lay down or a grass bed or whatever, and then I'll hop it in the middle of the water column, not on the bottom. That subtle lift and drop simulates, to me, a fleeing or a stunned bluegill, and man, it just gets hammered. And that's all in water that I've heard so many times to just leave your jig at home. So if you have been leaving your jig at home based on advice like that, take one out with you next time. Try it near laydowns, weed edges, over submerged grass. Just try to picture it as a bluegill pausing and darting around. That's exactly what I try to copy, and it works wonders. So those are the baits I'm always bringing with me when I go fishing. And hopefully I've taught you a thing or two about them to be able to use them yourself and catch more fish. And if you want to know what that chatterbait was, that is cheaper than a jackhammer and catches them just as good as one, I'll link that right here. And if you want to learn how to catch more bass with crankbaits in ponds, I'll link that one right here. And I'll see you in those videos.